Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best free counters to every single brawler in the game right now. So this is a series I've had for a couple of years now, but of course it's a little bit outdated. Last time I did it 50 brawlers, now there's 65. So of course a lot of brawlers to learn the counters for. So this list will be especially helpful in Power League when you're looking to counter the opposition brawlers. So before we jump into it, make sure using the creator code, that'd be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's hop into it. So to start with, we have Shelly. So Shelly, she's one of the worst brawlers in the game right now. So naturally, a lot of brawlers counter her. So basically anyone but tanks are going to counter her. But the main ones for sure have to be Nita, Spike, and Stu, because a lot of these brawlers will just easily be able to keep their distance between Shelly. So next up we have Nita. So of course Nita really lacks range, so if the map is opened up, that's going to counter her. But on her strongest maps, throwers are going to be a big pain for her, just because again she doesn't have a wall break capability or a way to counter a thrower. Or you can go with Spike. Spike is a traditional counter which has always been used to counter Nita, and then also of course you got wall break, so any type of wall break will really hurt Nita. So next up we have Colt's best counters. So the first one's going to be Piper. So I'm talking about the maps that Colt's already good on. Piper, you know, for like Safe Zone for example, Piper's just going to destroy Colt and Lane Bridge so far as well. It's an easy matchup for her. The next one is going to be Max as well. So Max is just going to be able to dodge Colt really easily, especially because Colt is one of the hardest brawlers to play. And then the last one is going to be Bell. So those long range brawlers are going to counter Colt because of course he hasn't got the longest range in the game. So those snipers are going to counter. So next up we have Bulls. So naturally again he's really bad, so a lot of brawlers are going to be able to counter him, but the best ones are going to be Primos. So a lot of times when I'm playing heist, if the enemy drafts a Bull, I like to go Primo, just absolutely destroys Bull in a 1v1. Next up we have Luz. So Luz just going to really easily counter Bull, especially when Bull charges in. Luke can just freeze him and stop him in his tracks. And then the last one is going to be Surge. So again, when Bull charges in, Surge can use his super and just destroy him. Next up we have Brock. So the first counter, the biggest one by far, is going to be Max. Main reason being is because Brock shot's actually quite easy to dodge around the mid kind of range of the rockets. So Max is going to be able to wiggle quite easily, and I know for sure just from past experience it's so annoying facing off against a good Max as a Brock. And the next one is going to be Mandy. So Mandy, the main reason being on those longer range maps, Mandy can actually two-shot a Brock, so of course that's going to be a big hard counter. And then the last one is going to be Sam. Any type of aggro can have a decent matchup, but Sam in particular because of his speed boost. So next up we have El Primo. So of course El Primo has one of the shortest ranges in the game, so of course range is going to be the key way to counter him. But if you want to counter him quite brutally, it's going to be the likes of Surge. Again, when Primo jumps in, Surge can easily use his super, chain his super, and destroy him. Next up, Colette. So Colette, of course, can just two-shot and super Primo and just destroy him. And then the next one is going to be Otis. So again, just when Primo jumps in, Otis can mute him pretty easily. There are a few other brawlers as well, like Stu, for example, who can get away from his jump. So next up, we have Barley's. So Barley's main counters, of course, going to be those assassin brawlers because he just doesn't have enough damage. Whereas Barley's really squishy, he's going to get taken down really quickly by assassins. So the first one is going to be Mortis, and the next one going to be Carl. So Carl can just keep going in aggro with his flying hook, and then once he gets his super, of course, Barley can't really do anything against that. And the last one is going to be Edgar's. So for example, you know, pit stop, I see a lot of Barley on that map, and a lot of people go Edgar in retaliation. The next brawler we have Poco. So the first counter, of course, is going to be Mortis again. This is just such a free matchup for Mortis. He can just continue to chain his bats. It's just a free super feed. The next one is going to be Ems. So I've talked about this briefly on another video, but Ems is just a really toxic matchup for Poco because Ems can just trap him with a super and just burst him down so quickly that Poco can't even charge his super again to heal back up. And then the last one is going to be B, or some type of slow mechanic, just because of course Poco is going to be, he has quite a lot of HP, so any slow mechanic is going to make it a lot easier to take him down. So next up we have Rosa's counters. So the first one is going to be Crow. So although Crow doesn't do the biggest amount of damage on tanks, I think he counters Rosa in particular because Rosa, she wants to be sneaky, especially with her gadgets. So being able to scout Rosa out, it's going to stop her from healing as well. So that's just a really good counter mechanic. Next one is Ems. So again, Ems just tends to shred tanks in general. So that super is going to be really toxic against Rosa. And then last one's going to be Griff. Main reason being is because Griff can break open grass and walls, so making it a lot easier to scout and find Rosa. Next up we have Jessie. So Jessie's terrible in the meta, so a lot of brawlers are going to naturally beat her in a 1v1. But if we're talking the hardest counters, if you're really struggling against Jessie, the first one of course it's going to be throwers. So a lot of throwers will two-shot or three-shot Jessie and her turret, and they can do it safely behind a wall whilst the turret can't of course get them. So of course throwers going to be the biggest counters. any brawler that outranges Jessie. Jessie doesn't have the longest range, so any brawler that can keep at a safe distance and not feed her turret, of course, is going to counter her. And then the last one is actually going to be tanks. So Jessie might be able to deal with tanks sometimes, but a lot of the time when they're literally up close and personal with Jessie, she just can't do anything about it. So we're talking about the Darryls, that any type of assassin can deal with Jessie easily. So next up we have Dinah. So the first counter, of course, is going to be Mortis. Everyone knows this matchup. It's just so hard to hit a Mortis as Dynamite. The next one's actually going to be an interesting one. I think Gray is a great counter to Dynamite. Main reason being is because you got Gray's gadget to pull Dynamite through walls and then maybe take him out with a couple of shots. But not only that, once you get your teleport, it's just a free kill every single time. Dynamite just has no way to defend himself. And then the last one being BB. BB with home run. It's so incredibly hard to hit her with Dynamite. So next up we have Tick. So the first one is going to be Max, because Tick just can't really deal with any pressure. So Max just causes insane pressure and just makes it so easy to run into the face of Tick, because of course Tick can't really defend himself at close range. And then the next one is going to be Sprout. Mainly just from my time in competitive over the years, I've always liked playing Sprout against Tick. I just think he's the better thrower in that 1v1 situation. And then the last one is going to be Ash. So any aggro can be decent against Tick, but I think Ash is the best one because of his range, and Tick will just deal nowhere near enough damage. Ash has 8,100 HP. He just can't do anything against that. So next up we have 8-bit's counter. So the first one is going to be Penny. So Penny's cannon can easily destroy 8-bit super, especially from far range, so that's going to be a big counter. Now like that, you've also got the splash, so if 8-bit puts his turret behind him, Penny's going to get insane value right there. The next one's going to be Squeak. So Squeak's going to be able to take down 8-bit's turret with 3 shots, especially when 8-bit normally places it behind a wall. So of course he's going to be the easiest brawler to take down 8-bit's turret. And then once his turret is down, 8-bit's really slow and easy to target. And the next one, there's a couple ones as well. You know, Belle, she can target 8-bit and especially make it easier to take him down. But you've also got Colette. You know, 8-bit has a lot of HP, so Colette, of course, is going to be a fantastic counter. So next up we have Rico's counters. So as a Rico main, I feel like I've got a good grasp of his counters. The first one, of course, going to be throwers. A lot of times I just hate facing throwers as Rico because I'm quite squishy. Although my gadget can help me heal up, throwers will just eventually get the better of Rico every single time. Next one's going to be like Bonnie or Fang. So any type of brawler that has an assassin feature is going to be able to destroy Rico because he just has no way to defend himself. So like Bonnie, for example, when she gets her super, she's going to destroy Rico every single time. And then you've also got Fang that can, of course, super on top of Rico, stun him. You know, he can't really do anything about that. And then you also got the likes of Buzz and Gray as well, who are pretty hybrid assassins. So next up we have Darryl. So Darryl, of course, being a tank, anything that outranges him will have a decent matchup against him. But the main ones, it's going to be the first one, Primo. So we're talking heist. Again, just like Bull, if someone drafts a Darryl or a Bull, I really like Primo in retaliation because it's just a fantastic counter to his fellow tanks. Next up we have Surge. So again, just like Bull, once they go in, once they roll in, Surge can just easily jump on them. Cycle is super, they can't really do much about that. And then lastly we have Gale. So although Gale's not the best tank counter, at least when Darryl rolls in, Gale can use his gadget to push him away. So next up we have one of the best brawlers in the game with Penny. So the first counter is going to be Squeak. So Squeak can just safely take down her turret with a couple of shots, especially when it's placed behind a wall. Squeak's always been a fantastic counter to her. The next one's going to be Griff. So again, being able to break open as many walls as possible or shoot around walls is going to be the biggest way to counter a brawler like Penny. Griff using his piggy bank to break open a wall is going to be really good. And then you've also got Cole. So of course Cole can shoot through her salty barrel, but just in general Cole's super can just absolutely shred for a penny. So next up we have the counters to Cole. So basically anything that interrupts Cole's super is going to be somewhat of a decent counter because that's where his best assets lie, in his supers. So the first counter is going to be Surge. Surge is just a free matchup every single time because if you're a Cole, you can't really go into Surge once he has that super. Next one's going to be Jean. So Jean's got the knockback, but also he's got the super to easily pull a Carl. He can just burst down Cole so easily with the help of a teammate. And then the last one is going to be Buzz because Buzz can easily interrupt Cole's super with his stun. Next up we have Jackie. So she has one of the shortest ranges in the game. So of course being able to keep away from her is going to be the way to counter her. But the biggest hard counters, first one has to be Frank. So Frank has some decent range as a tank and his super can stun Jackie, stay away from that counter crusher and get her down pretty quickly. Next one's going to be Beast. So again, being able to slow slow her once she uses her gadget, and just keeping distance at general is really easy as a B. And then the last one is going to be a brawler like M. So again, being able to use super, stay away from Jackie is the key to victory. So next up we have Gus. So the first big counter, of course, is going to be any tanky unit, especially an assassin, because he hasn't got the highest DPS and quite a slow reload speed, so they're going to be able to take him down quite easily in a 1v1. But next up is going to be, again, like Sam, Buzz, Asher, the three that really spring to mind, because they're going to be able to just run up to him and take him down pretty easily. And then the last one's actually going to be a Lola. So Lola can waste a lot of Gus's ammo, especially with her ego and the gadget. Gus just has a terrible time against her. So now moving on to Bo's counters, starting off with Max. Max has just been able to wiggle through Bo's attack pretty easily, and I just love that matchup personally. Next up is going to be Cole. So Cole can just easily avoid Bo's mines, both with the gadget and the super. And in a 1v1, Cole can just easily destroy a Bo. And the last one's going to be Stu. So again, Stu can dodge around Bo's attacks and mines quite easily with his super. So now moving on to Ems' counters. So the first one is going to be Mortis. So the key thing to counter in Ems is getting rid of those gadgets. Those gadgets can actually win a matchup against pretty much everything. So once she's got rid of her gadgets, a lot of assassins or just any brawler really close to her is going to take her down pretty quickly. So of course Mortis, once the gadgets down, just completely destroy her. The next one's going to be Ruffs. So a key way to counter her as well is by range, especially down the lane. So Ruffs being able to break open the map with his super, I always find a fantastic counter against Ems. And then the last one's going to be Crow. You can actually outrange an Ems with Crow, I believe. And then once you get the slows and supers against Ems, it's just pretty hard to deal with. So next up we have Stu's counters. So the first big counter is going to be any brawler with any type of gadget being able to waste his ammo. He hasn't got the most DPS, so a couple of ammos wasted on gadgets. It's going to make it pretty easy to take him down. The next one's going to be Crow, because Crow can keep his distance fairly well, and then also slow him to make him an easy target. Next one's going to be Pam with a Scrap Sucker gadget, because he can remove his ammo and take him down so easily. And you've also got Pam's turret, which can waste a lot of his ammo. And the last one's going to be Lola. So again, wasting his ammo against the ego is essential to victory. So next up we have Piper's counters. So Piper on long range maps is one of the best brawlers in the game in that scenario, but still there are a few brawlers that can outrange her. So Nani and Mandy are the only two brawlers that can outrange her, so of course they're going to be her key counters on those long range maps. Next up you have Sprout, or any type of thrower. A lot of times can be really annoying as a Piper to face off against, especially with maps with unbreakable walls right now. It's just pretty hard, especially Sprout and Grom can pretty much 2 or 3 tap her at any distance. And then lastly we have Leon, because Leon will just have a field day on any sharpshooter, but especially Piper. Piper can't do any damage up close, so Leon's just going to shred her. So next up we have Pam and her counters. So the first one is going to be Ems. So after playing Pam for a long time, I know her counters pretty well. So Ems is just a really good counter against Pam, of course. Any high HP brawler, Ems going to have a good time against, but normally you use Pam on maps like Double Swoosh. So I've seen a lot of counters with Ems right there. The next one's going to be Lou. So again, Lou will just have a field day on any type of high HP brawler, being able to cycle super pretty easily on her. Luz just destroys Pam. And then you've also got the likes of Crow. So Crow's going to be a good counter, especially to kind of cancel out her heal. So next up we have the best counters to Frank. So naturally he has a lot of counters, hence why he's one of the worst brawlers in the game, even with the highest HP in the game. So Colette's going to be the first big counter. Of course, Colette's going to be really good against tankier brawlers. Her super is just going to literally destroy Frank. Frank has no answer to Colette's supers. Next is Primo. So Primo is really good against Frank because you've got the super, well, Primo's super to, of course, stop Frank's super, but you also got Primo's gadget, which can stop Frank's super. So Frank just has a really hard matchup against Primo. And then the next two are Carl and Shelly. So Shelly, of course, just going to delete Frank with super, and then Carl's super as well. It's going to be really hard for Frank to deal with it. So next up we have a BB's counters. So again, another brawler which really lacks the range, and there's going to be a lot of counters to BB. That's why she's near the bottom of the meta. So brawlers like Primo, again, just absolutely destroy BB. BB has no chance against Primo. Next one being Surge as well. Surge will just have a field day on BB with his supers. And the next up is Stu, because Stu can just easily stay away from BB with his supers. Next up we have B's counters. So being the best brawler in the game, or one of them, she doesn't have a lot of counters, but the two key ones are going to be Grom and Sprout, because she has a low amount of HP, especially on maps with a lot of walls. Throwers are just going to be able to free tap her so easily. B has no response to that. And the last one is going to be Byron. So there's a couple of brawlers that will outrange her, but Byron, he has the extra range, but he also has the faster projectile. and a much bigger projectile, so of course that's going to help him in a 1v1. Next up we have Nani's counters. So the first one is going to be Jean. The main reason being is because Jean can kind of compete with Nani's range, but not only that, Nani will get no value out of return to sender gadget when you're facing Jean, because of course Jean will deal like 200 damage a shot, so of course that return damage is literally nothing. And the next one's going to be Leon. So again, another brawler that can get close to Nani, and Nani can't get any value out of the gadget, so Leon's just going to be really good, especially with the speed and just the assassin capabilities. It's going to take down Nani so quickly. And the last one is going to be Max. So of course Nani's main attack is just so hard to hit, even for his most skillful players, so a brawler like Max should be able to wiggle in and out of Nani quite easy. Next up we have Edgar. So naturally Edgar has a lot of counters just because he's the worst brawler in the game, and without super he has obviously no range and he's just terrible, really squishy as well. So the biggest counter by far is Surge. So when Edgar was the best brawler in the game, Surge was by far the best counter, so of course that will still relate when Edgar is worst brawler in the game, because Surge can 2 or 3 tap Edgar a lot of times, and then you got Surge's super when Edgar jumps in. Of course Edgar can't do anything against that. The next one is going to be Buzz. So again, Buzz can just stun Edgar. Nothing really Edgar can do to that, because by the time he's unstunned he'll be dead, because Buzz will just completely destroy him. And the last one is going to be Otis. So again, when Edgar jumps in, Otis can just mute him and there's nothing that he can do. So next up we have Griff. So the first counter is going to be Stu. So Stu's always been a good counter against Griff, because their ranges are quite similar, but once Stu gets his super, he can just avoid Griff's super and attack really easily, so of course a really good counter. The next one's going to be Crow. So Crow's going to really nullify Griff's star power basically, so it's not going to be able to get as much healing from that star power, and of course it's going to be a big counter to him. And the last one is going to be B. So B will just heavily outrange Griff, and when Griff opens up the map, of course that makes it better for B, and B can just destroy him. So next up we have Grom. So one of the most annoying brawlers in the meta right now, and he's still incredibly strong. The main way to counter him is just by getting as close as possible to him, so whether that's just pressure in general or assassins, they're going to be your best bets. So the likes of Fang, Daryl and Mortis, getting close and personal with Grom, it's going to be the best way to counter. So next up we have Bonnie's counters. So the first one is going to be Colette. So Bonnie being a high HP brawler, Colette's just going to have a field day on, and especially if Bonnie wants to jump in, Colette has her super to hand. Bonnie can't do anything, can't even waste super on a Colette, because that's just literally asking for death. And next one is going to be Penny. So Penny, again, Penny has that gadget to hand, so if Bonnie wants to jump on top of a Penny, she can't really do anything. Penny will just destroy her. And not only that, you've got Penny's gadget just to tank Bonnie's shots in general. And the last one is going to be Lose. So again, Bonnie being high HP but also having a slow reload speed, it's going to make it even easier for a brawler like Lou to hit her, farm some supers, and it's just going to be a field day for Lou. So next up we have Mortis. So of course, him being an assassin, he can counter a lot of different brawlers, but not only that, he has a lot of counters himself, so that's why he's normally at the bottom of the meta kind of ranking videos. So first one again is going to be Surge. Surge is a common counter to all of the assassins because of how easy it is for him to get his super, and then of course stun them with his super, so that's going to be the biggest one. Next one is going to be Shelly. So Shelly's super is just going to destroy Mortis, so there's nothing Mortis can really do unless he can chain his bats onto multiple people. Then he might be able to take down a Shelly. And then the last one's going to be Otis. So Otis just absolutely destroys Mortis. You also have Gale as well, 2 brawlers which Mortis can't get anywhere close to. So next up we have Tara. So Tara is really bad in the meta. She doesn't really counter too many brawlers herself, and she has a lot of counters. The first one, of course, being Sandy. So Sandy can shoot through her pets, but not only that, just out wall peek her a lot of the time so much easier. So Sandy's always the one brawler I like going against Tara. Next one being Ems as well. So again, Ems can wall peek a lot better, deal a lot more damage a lot better as well, and I just like Ems against that Tara. And the last one's going to be Amber. So on a few maps which Tara's really good on, Amber's a really good counter because you can destroy Tara's grass. You know, Tara really needs a grassy map to thrive, and then also Amber can just shoot through her pets. Next up we have one of my main brawlers in Jean. So Jean can get countered in a couple of ways. The first easy way to counter Jean is by having a brawler with a gadget that can tank his pulls. So as a Jean, you know you can't pull their opponent, even for example, say if Tick has head, for example, or if some Tara pets or something like that, Stu's turret, you can't pull any of those brawlers because you're going to waste your pull until of course those gadgets go. Next one, of course, well, the main one's going to be Penny, because Penny's gadget just overall just really screws up Jean. Next one being Mr. P. Mr. P will just waste so much ammo from Gene's constant porters. You know, Gene doesn't have the fastest reload speed, so of course that's really going to hurt him. Same goes for Eve as well. Once those hatchlings come in, Gene's just going to have to waste all of his ammo, and there's nothing he can do. So now we're looking at ways to counter Max. So the first one is going to be Crow. Crow can easily deal with a Max with his slows to, of course, counter out Max's supers, but also they've got similar range, and Crow's shots are just really easy to hit, so of course it's going to be a good counter to Max, because Max herself is really hard to hit. The next one's going to be Poco. So especially on hot zone maps, Poco's just always been good at dealing against a Max. It's just one of those things in competitive. And the last one is going to be Lola. So Lola can also have similar range to Max, or also outrange Max, but also the Ego can really help waste a lot of Max's ammo, because Max does have 4 pieces of ammo, but a lot of the times doesn't really deal the most damage. So of course that Ego and the gadget can really help. So next up we have Mr. P. So in the current meta, I feel like pretty much everything counts Mr. P, especially on ladder. Any form of tank will just destroy Mr. P. So I'm talking about Jackie, Buzz, Ash, all of these tanks will destroy him. Fang, any assassin, he just stands no chance against. So now we're looking at ways to counter Sprout. So the main way to counter most throwers, and especially Sprout, is by getting close to him, because he really finds it hard to hit opponents when they're literally close to his face. So the first one, of course, is going to be Mortis. So I've had a handful of times in Power League where the enemy has gone Sprout, and I've just gone a Mortis, and it's just been so easy to kill Sprout over and over again. It's just a free super every single time. The next one's going to be Edgar. So Edgar, of course, just going to destroy Sprout in a 1v1. Sprout has no way to knock back an Edgar or do anything like that. And then the last one is going to be Daryl. So again, those assassin brawlers are really going to be troublesome for throwers. Next up we have Byron. So Byron, naturally, he's really bad in the meta, so a lot of those assassin brawlers can take him down quite quickly. But the main one is going to be Crow. So Crow will counter out his healing. Of course, Byron's normally a support brawler, so any heals he'll be putting out, Crow's going to be able to counter that a little bit. And then next up we have Leon. So again, another assassin where Leon can just go close to Byron and just take him down within a flash. Byron doesn't do instant damage except for his super, so of course a brawler like Leon can take him down so quickly. And then finally, I think Gus is a good counter to Byron, because Gus has an easy to hit attack. So in a 1v1, I feel like Gus will win that. So next up we have Squeak. So Squeak can be really good in some settings, but the main reason why I don't pick Squeak too often is because he's overwhelmed pretty easily, especially by those aggro brawlers or brawlers with a lot of HP, because he won't deal damage instantly, because that's just the way his mechanics are. So the first big counter is going to be Leon. So again, Leon can just quickly run into a Squeak and burst him down so quickly. Squeak has no answer to that. He can't deal enough damage quickly. Next one's going to be Mortis and Carl. So 2 similar assassins. They're just going to be able to feed off a Squeak, get their supers so easily. It's so hard to deal with assassins as a Squeak. So next up we have the counters to Gray. So the first one is going to be B. So B is a really good counter to Gray. She will outrange Gray, but not only that, when Gray wants to teleport onto a B, a lot of times she can have her shield star power, she'll have her gadget to tank a shot. It's just really hard to kill a B with Gray. The next one's going to be Spike. So again, you don't want to be teleporting onto a Spike, because Spike uses gadget to tank, and also Spike has some pretty good range with curveballs, so he can deal a lot of damage quickly to Gray. And the last one's going to be Penny. So again, you don't want to be teleporting onto a Penny, because she'll be able to place her gadget down and quickly 2 or 3 shot you really fast. So next up we have the counters to Spike. So the first one is going to be Grom. Well, we can say Grom and Sprout the same pretty much, but Grom can deal damage much quicker. He can 2-shot Spike in that specific spot. That's just so dangerous. You know, Spike's so squishy, so of course throws are going to really dominate him a lot of the times. But last one's going to be Cole. So Cole's always been a great counter to Spike, because a lot of times he will literally 2-shot him, and also his normal shot will go through Spike's gadget. And that's a lot of the time the way Spike can win a matchup is through his gadgets. Of course, Cole's going to counter. So now moving on to Crow's counters, starting off with Janet. So Janet has similar range to Crow, and if you're not poisoned by Crow, you can 3-shot him. So that's a really good thing. And Janet's shots are just pretty easy to hit even at max range, so that's why I think it's a good 1v1. And also she has her gadget to tank Crow Jump, so that's also one thing to note, is that brawlers with good gadgets or something that can counter Crow's jumps, it's going to work out pretty well. So the next one's going to be Spike. So for that reason, Spike's got a gadget to tank, but not only that, he can just tank Crow's main attack, and also he can hit Crow quite luckily with curveball a lot of times. And the last one is going to be Lola. So Crow just has a really tough time against Lola, because he deals no damage, especially against that clone, and if he wants to jump on top of a Lola, he's not even going to be able to get close to Lola because of that ego. So next up we have the biggest counters to Leon. So the biggest counter to Leon is vision gear. So any brawler that's able to scout places pretty easily with a vision gear is going to be his biggest counter. So the first one is going to be Crow. Crow's main attack can just easily scout bushes, and then you've got the poison just to counter him. Anyway, you've got the slows as well, just makes it really easy to take down a Leon. The next one's going to be Gene. So again, Gene's main attack can just scout so easily with vision gear. He's going to be able to scout out Leon when he's trying to creep with that super. And the last one's going to be Pam. So Pam can easily scout with a min attack, but not only that, when Leon actually makes it close to Pam could just use a gadget, and then Leon has no ammo. So next up we have Sandy's counter. So the main way to counter Sandy is by DPS. Sandy has a slow reload speed and not the most damage. So the first couple are going to be tanks. Ash is going to be able to 2 or 3 shot Sandy a lot of the time, and just with the rage, it's just really easy to deal with a brawler like Sandy. The next one being El Primo. So even though Sandy can stun you when El Primo jumps, I just think it's such an easy matchup for an El Primo to deal with. And then the last one's going to be Poco. So the main reason why Poco counters Sandy is because by the time Sandy's about to kill Poco, Poco would have cycled his super by then, so then he's able to get a heal off, and Sandy just can't deal with a constant healer. So next up we're countering Amber then. So the first big counter is going to be Crow. So Crow has kind of similar range to an Amber, but really easy to hit attack with Crow. And then you've got the slows, and then you've got eventually the jump, and the super just destroys Amber. There's no way she can deal with it. Same goes with Leon. Leon, she'll have a chip battle against Leon, but then he'll get his super and just be able to get really close to Amber, and there's nothing she can do. And then the last one is going to be Cole. So again, once Cole gets super, he can just destroy Amber. There's no way Amber can do anything against it. So next up we have Meg. So she's not really a meta right now. She's only strong in hot zone, and she's actually just countered out a lot of the time because she can't deal enough damage in her single form. So of course you want to counter her the most in single form, so that's going to be in a form of Lola, especially when she's got her ego. Single form Meg just can't deal with the ego, can't kill the ego, and thus can't charge up her super. So any brawler not allowing her to charge up her super is going to be really strong. Pam is just high HP, and also you've got the turret. You can use the turret to tank a lot of Meg's shots. It's going to be hard for Meg to deal with. And then you got Spike and B as well. So these are going to be the main counters, especially in hot zone. So next up we have Chester. So I feel like pretty much anyone that isn't a tank can counter Chester because he's not the strongest right now. So the first one is going to be Stu. I feel like Stu just have a field day on Chester. It's just hard for Chester to really get any consistent damage on Stu when he's just dashing around. And then next up we have Spike. So again, Spike in a lane battle should just easily be able to deal with Chester. Chester just can't really keep up with the range and the damage. And the last one is going to be Nita. So if you're talking about kind of like a wall peak battle, Nita can just easily keep Chester at bay. So now moving on to the Chromatic brawlers, starting off with Gale. So Gale used to counter tanks, and I'd say now that tanks can actually counter him. He's terrible right now. So the first big counter to Gale is going to be Nita. Gale just can't deal with Nita's bear, and just overall in a 1v1, he isn't really able to beat her in a wall peeking battle. Next one is being B. So especially in the open map, maybe that's probably best to use Gale right now because of his other star power. But B can just outrange Gale and just dominate him really easily. And the last one is going to be Bo. So again, outranging Gale and just being able to keep him back with the mines. Okay, so next up we're going to be looking at how to counter Surge. So I think this is the big one that everyone is going to be wondering, because Surge dominates at low level, but not only that, he dominates at the highest level now. So the biggest counters to him, so there's a couple of ways you can. So the first one, of course, is by trying to outrange him for as long as possible. So trying to keep the range, not allow him to get his first level, whether that's breaking open the map so then he can't get into range, or just, you know, using gadgets to tank his shots, or just as a team collectively trying to ignore him because he doesn't really pose a threat as that first level. So of course, brawlers like Spike and Ruffs can use gadgets and tank his shots. Same go with Penny as well. So the hardest counters have to be gadgets that can tank multiple shots of his. So next up, we're going to be looking at the biggest counters to Colette. So basically, anyone that isn't a tank is going to be a good matchup against Colette. But the first one's going to be Mr. P. Mr. P isn't the best in the meta, but Mr. P is going to be really annoying for Colette because she's going to have to constantly waste multiple ammos on one porter. So of course that's really going to hurt her, and it's always been one of the biggest counters to her. Next one's going to be Poco. So Poco can just nullify her main shots just by healing, especially using the gadget or the super. So of course any type of healing mechanic is really going to hurt a brawler like Colette. And then the next one is going to be Griff. So again, with Griff's star power, he can constantly heal up, and by the time you want to maybe two-shot and super someone, you can't do that with Griff because he'll be healing up, so you're going to have to deal multiple shots more to him to be able to get him within that threshold. So next up we have the biggest counters to Lou. So Lou he's mainly dominant in the hot zone, so these are the best counters to him in hot zone. First one being Bell. So I've seen it a few times, especially in the more longer range hot zone maps. People use Bell because Bell is just a really good counter because, of course, she outranges him. But not only that, she's got the gadgets as well that can kind of act as a small blue super in a way, because once Swan runs into that Bell trap, they can then gain control of the zone. So, of course, that's what you look to do with Lu's super. And then, of course, you don't want to feed him super, so Bell can outrange and stop that. Next one being Bo. So, again, another brawler that will outrange Lu. But not only that, he has his mines to keep kind of Lu back and stop him from cycling super. And the last one is going to be B. So, of course, another brawler that heavily outranges him. So, next up, we have Ruffs and his counters. So, we're talking back when he was released. The biggest counter for me had to be throwers, but in general, Sprout. Sprout can free tap a Ruffs, and a lot of the times, it's just a really easy matchup. So, a lot of the time, if I've got a last pick and I know I'm laning Ruffs, it can be a good option to go a Sprout. Next one being Janet. So Janet can shoot through Ruffs sandbags. Not only that, she can free shot him, so a pretty easy matchup for a Janet. And then the last one is going to be Carl, because of course Ruffs isn't going to be able to deal with the damage. He's pretty squishy, so Carl can just easily delete him. So next up we have ways to counter Belle. So the first one is going to be by outranging her. So the maps which she's good in normally are the long range maps like Shooting Star, for example. So there's a couple of brawlers that will outrange her quite easily. So Piper, Mandy, and Nanny come to mind because they all outrange her. So of course that's a big way to counter her. The next one's going to be any type of thrower again. So she's really squishy. Any brawler that's below like 4,200 are countered by throwers. Brawlers like Sprout and Grom should be able to have a really good matchup against her. So next up we have Buzz. So the biggest counter by far to Buzz is Surge. So just like Edgar, Surge is a fantastic counter against, because once they want to go in, Surge will just be able to feed his super so easily off of Buzz, and then if Buzz ever gets his stun, Surge can just use his super and stun him and cycle again. So of course it's going to be a really hard matchup for Buzz. Next up as well, Gale. So just like Mortis, can't deal with Gale because of that gadget, and it's just really hard to even get close to Gale because of the constant supers and gadgets. And then the last few we have Stu, who can escape Buzz's stun, and then also you have Jackie, where a lot of times you'll just end up trading with Jackie because of the counter crusher. So next up we have the best counters to Ashe. So it's very important to learn the counters or ways to counter Ashe, because at the highest level he can absolutely dominate, especially in certain situations and game modes. So the first one is going to be Primo. So Primo with El Fuego is just able to deal so much damage, constantly stunning Ashe and just dealing so much damage. Ashe just can't deal with it. The next one is Rosa. So recently, especially on grassy maps, people have been using Rosa with Thorny Glove star power to counter an Ashe, because Ashe just can't deal with damage, especially when Rosa's constantly cycling supers on him. And then the additional damage with Thorny Gloves just makes it so easy to take him down quickly. And then the last one's going to be Lu. So Lu can just get a free super from Ashe and just keep him in a free slot. So next up we have Lola. So the biggest counter to Lola is going to be Penny, mainly because you want to be putting your ego in front of you when you're playing Lola. And then if there's a Penny on the enemy team, Penny could just shoot that ego and deal a lot of damage to you. And a lot of times will actually end up killing you if you put your ego in front of you against their pennies. So yeah, of course it's going to be a big counter. Next one going to be Amber. So of course Amber can just shoot through the ego and deal damage to you. So of course that's a really good counter. And then the last one is going to be Janet. So just like Amber, she can shoot through the ego and hit Lola herself. The next brawler we're countering is Fang. So Fang, he's an assassin, so of course a brawler like Surge is going to have a really good matchup against him, because Surge can just get a free super, and then once Surge has super, there's no way that Fang can really go close to him because he'll just delete him. And then next up we have Jean. So Jean's a good counter to Fang because he can get a good amount of super damage against Fang, but if Fang ever wants to super onto a Jean, Jean can just knock him back, and a lot of time Jean likes to pair up with a lot of brawlers, so it can be pretty hard to face off against Jean compositions with a Fang. And then lastly we have Eve. So Eve is a good counter because on game modes like Knockout and Bounty, that's where you see Fang the most, and if you want to super on top of an Eve, she's just gonna jump away, and she can also outrange you quite heavily. So next up we have the best counters to Eve. So starting off with Penny. So the main reason being is because of Penny's splash damage, especially if someone's behind a hatchling, they're going to receive a lot of damage by that splash. And the next one is going to be Janet. So again, Janet can just shoot through the hatchlings, but not only that, can pretty much free shot an Eve a lot of times. And it's just pretty easy for Janet to get a lot of pressure onto Eve. And then the last one is going to be Max. So Eve doesn't like it when a brawler is really close, well, up close and personal. and of course Eve isn't the easiest brawler to hit shots with, so Max is going to make that really hard. So next up we have the biggest counters to Janet. So she doesn't have a lot of counters, hence why she's one of the best brawlers in the game, but the main one is going to be Ash, especially on gem grab. It's just pretty hard to kill an Ash as a Janet because you've got the speed boost, you've got the healing gadget, and you've just got so much damage going his way. He's going to be able to win that lane 1v1. Next one's going to be Bonnie. So again, Bonnie has a lot of HP, and just eventually Bonnie can just win that matchup. And with the constant supers as well, it's hard for Janet to deal with. And the last one's going to be Gus, because I feel like just in a 1v1, Gus should have a semi-decent matchup. So next up, we have the counters to Otis. So the main way to counter Otis is by having a brawler that has a gadget that can tank his super, because as an Otis, you don't really want to risk kind of super in a brawler with that gadget that's tankable, because else you're going to waste your super, right? And either that or it's a brawler that outranges him. So brawlers like B can have a really good effect against Otis in the open. So next up we have Sam. So the main way to counter Sam is by stopping him, getting his super back. So some players really like to revolve around their super and just constantly chase it and spam it against walls. So any brawler that has any stun or any type of way to stop him getting his super is going to be the best way to counter him. So that's going to be brawlers like El Primo, because El Primo's super can just destroy Sam, and Sam doesn't do the most damage as a tank to his fellow tanks. Next one's going to be Surge. So again, Surge with his super can just stop Sam from getting his back. It's just common knowledge now. And then the last one's going to be Gale, because Gale's Tornado, you can place a Tornado on top of the super and then Sam can't get it back. The next brawler we're going to be countering is Buster. So Buster, it's just pretty bad right now, so a lot of brawlers can just naturally counter Buster, but the main way to counter him is again by those fellow tank counters. So Surge is a big one that's countering so many meta brawlers right now, but Surge can just destroy Buster. So easy to farm his super, and then once Buster uses his super, Surge can just jump in and destroy him pretty easy. Next one's going to be Daryl. So even when Buster was the best brawler in the game, Daryl was a good counter because he can bypass Buster's super, roll on top of him, and Daryl will win that close fight. Just by, of course, the damage comparison. And then the last one's going to be Buzz. So again, Buzz can bypass the kind of shield, stun him, and just destroy him up close. The next brawler we're going to be countering is Mandy. So Mandy is a brawler that doesn't like aggression, because once she misses a couple of shots, it's really easy to take her down. So the first counter is going to be Max. Max just being able to get a lot of pressure with his super is going to be a pretty easy way to take her down. Next one's going to be Fang. So Fang, especially in knockout, he's pretty strong, especially against those sharpshooters, and she just can't deal enough damage to take him down quickly. And then the last one is going to be Mortis. So again, another assassin that should be able to deal with her easily. And lastly, we're going to be looking at the ways to counter the brand new brawler RT. So RT is a brawler mechanically that can win a lot of different matchups, even against his hard counters, because in his other form, he might be able to counter them. But anyways, the biggest hard counters that I've found, first one's going to be Penny. So Penny's a really good one, because once RT splits with his super, Penny can just get a lot of splash damage, and it's just really awkward to face off against Penny a lot of times as an RT. And also you have the gadget to tank his normal main long shot. And the next one's going to be Max. So again, you know, RT is pretty hard to hit shots with, because his projectile's actually pretty slim. Even though it's fast, it's really slim. So a brawler like Max is actually incredibly hard to hit. And the last brawler is going to be Spike, mainly because of his super, but I feel like Spike can have a decent matchup against RT. Alright guys, it's going to be it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed this one. So super long video. I tried to make it as quickly as possible, but you know what I'm like. I just completely waffle when I'm talking about Brawl Stars. So hopefully I helped you guys out. I know it's a really long video, but let me know what videos you want to see next. Maybe you want to see the best builds in Brawl Stars, or like the best build for every single brawler, or the best matchup for every single brawler. Just give me as many video ideas as possible. But that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.